This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for the Intentionality Gurus with Candace Pollock. And today's subject is problem versus solution perspective. And I had to make sure I just said that very, very clearly because I think there's those of us who think that we only have the problems but no solutions. And there are other people who believe they have all the solutions for everything in the world.
Yes, we both know both types, right? But
Right.
they don't always overlap.
Right. Exactly.
So the idea in the conversation today is just gaining some perspective on where we're starting from, say, when we're either working on our own issues or we're observing, other people with their issues, and how we orient to the issue at hand can dictate what becomes available to us in terms of outcomes. So that's a lot of words. What do you think I
Right.
mean by that?
So I think it's when you have a problem, um, sometimes you see it differently than the way you're expressing it. And so therefore the solutions can be difficult to find.
Exactly, spot on. Because we're so focused on the problem, it's almost like we're wearing blinders and we can't see that there are these other things out there that we could consider that may seem far-fetched or totally unrelated. But when we come at it from a different perspective that we're going to talk about, most of those blinders can fall away. Now, some of us, I mean, not me ever, but some of us like to hang on to those blinders, like, no,
Right.
this is how I see it. This is how it is. But even that is something that I could notice and work around. So anything in particular for you that may occur that would benefit from this conversation today?
Sure. It's interesting that, and I never thought of it until I was hearing you just, describe it. My mother was a person who had blinders on. So if you would tell her something, she only could see it one way. And then she would keep repeating it over and over again. So like if I did something wrong, and she used to always tell me I washed dishes wrong, there was only one way it could be done. But no matter how well I did them, the blinders were Karen does the dishes wrong. And it was frustrating my whole life. In fact, before she died, she never told me how I was supposed to wash those dishes. Um, and it was like I couldn't get it right in her mind.
So the problem is the dishes weren't being done correctly when you did them.
Absolutely. That's what she would say.
All right. And there seemed to be no solution to that.
No solution.
Okay. And when you had the experience of your mother either overtly chastising you or correcting you or whatever, what did that feel like?
I felt like the naughty child. The problem is that the naughty child wasn't being told what to do correctly. And so I knew every time I went to wash the dishes, I was going to be the naughty child, even as an adult.
Yeah, and sometimes it feels like the naughty child inside of us, like the Tony the Tiger Cornflakes kid inside of the adult body. If
Yep.
anybody remembers that commercial.
Yep.
It apparently impressed me because I remember it as an analogy. And so when we look at it from the problem perspective, something to overcome, what are some of the ideas that come to mind?
Well, if I could have been told what I was doing wrong in her eyes, at least when I was doing it in her home or when she was overseeing, I could have learned to do them her way and therefore be the good child.
Okay, so this opens up another part of the conversation. And so when we let me explore it from the problem perspective a little more. So then the so-called solution appears to be learning how to do the dishes correctly.
Yes.
Okay. And when that comes to mind, what are your thoughts? Either
Um,
as a child or, as a child inside the adult.
well, number one, it would have taken away the angst that I would have when I was doing the dishes for her. But also, now I can look at it as saying, well, I could have learned another way of doing something. Maybe there was really nothing wrong with my way, but there was another way, which was hers, but I never learned it
And you never learned it.
because she
It's
didn't teach it to me. I was never told what I was doing wrong. I always made the assumption that I thought I knew what I was doing wrong. And so when I would make that shift, it still was wrong.
And so what evidence did you have specifically that it was wrong? What she
Um,
told you things,
my
or how did it show up?
she would notice it, it's really, this is really funny when growing up, especially um, when I would wash dishes, my mother would sit in the kitchen at the kitchen table and scrutinize everything I was doing. But it's not like if I was doing something and she would say it's wrong, she wouldn't even tell me to do it right. She would just say, that's the wrong way to do it. And so I was just going to have to be wrong.
And so saying this now, what is occurring to you?
Um, I don't think my mother knew how to explain to me to do it her way, to be honest. But I just know as a child and an adult, I always felt like I wasn't good enough in her eyes.
And so how did you feel about washing dishes,
Um,
particularly in the presence of your mother?
Hated it. Just, and I would tell her afterwards, if I'm not doing this right, I don't want to do it again. And every time she'd say, well, then just don't do it again. But I'd go back to visit and, it'd be after dinner and there would be, a slew of dishes and pots and pans. She had done the cooking. I felt it was my obligation to wash dishes, despite knowing what was going to happen.
Yeah, so a sense of resignation to you're just going to slide into that cycle again of not doing it correctly and
Right.
feeling lousy about it and so on.
Exactly.
And so there are probably other instances that are parallel to that. It wouldn't be necessarily washing dishes, but there are probably other instances with your mother or not. But the lesson to pay attention to, the thing to notice is this cycle. How does this pattern show up? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm kind of struggling with how to do this without, not giving away the answer, but I want to be able to illuminate this fork in the road because it's really important to get this concept.
Okay.
So up to this point, it sounds like we have more or less a binary, a yes or a no approach to it, which is I have to learn to do it correctly or not do it.
I never thought about not doing it. It was, I have to do it correctly or accept the fact that in her eyes, it wasn't going to be right. And in some way, I was going to be reprimanded.
And never have the approval of your mother.
Right. Right.
Okay. All right. And that always feels wonderful, not having the approval of your mother.
Yeah.
Okay.
So wonderful. And, and sometimes I can see it transferring to other things uh, in my life that, you try to do something for someone, and because it's not the way they would have done it, it's not good enough that you have done it.
So it's always a sense of letting somebody down.
Yes.
Or I had a first boss who used to give me very oblique instructions. She was always rushing against deadline. She would give me things at the last minute without, just do this, just put these things in this notebook and, do this. And, I was brand new on the job. I didn't have any frame of reference, and so on. And then she'd come back and say, no. And one time she said to me, or actually it was quite often, why would you think that? And I'm saying to myself, because I just got released from a psychiatric hospital, why would I intentionally do it wrong?
Yeah.
Well, the irony was later, I was in a paralegal job at the time. Later, I was a freelance paralegal. I had my own paralegal business, and she became one of my clients, but I had wised up to that whole dynamic. Still had a lot of evolution to go, but I took it to heart when she would basically say those things as if there was some flaw in me,
Right.
and so on. And coming into the interaction with her was always sucky. Was not enjoyable, as much as I admired a lot of qualities that she had. So the premise is that right now we don't have an array of options, it seems. So it kind of keeps the blinders on in terms of how we might relate to this dynamic or this experience that probably replicates itself in other areas.
Absolutely.
All
Mhm.
right. So what if we shifted and came at it from the perspective of, so how do you feel when you're in this instance? You already described that, but if you can describe it again with your mom, just, picture that.
Mhm. So I feel inadequate.
And what does inadequate mean? And where does it show up in your body?
Um, it shows up in my head. It shows up emotionally that I tear up um, because I want to do things right so I can get the approval of other people.
Okay. So if we look at the same scenario and I asked you the question, um, what would you want to be different? What are the answers?
Um, so the first answer is to just like sort of block out her words, um, because there probably is no way to meet her expectations. So that's okay. Like understanding that this is just her talking. Um, the other probably would have been, and I don't think I ever asked her, um, what is the right way to do the dishes? Um, or what is your right way to do the dishes? If I could have asked that question, um, maybe I could have gotten an answer and from that point forward, you know, been doing things right. Um, or just explain that this is my way of doing the dishes and be very positive in it that um, I'm right.
Anything else?
Stop doing the dishes.
I like that one. Although I was the designated dishwasher after holidays and stuff.
But I find that this same scenario has been through my whole life, whether it be at work or trying to do something for somebody. Um, it's like, why did you do it that way? Well, like you said to your boss, well, this is the only way I knew how to do it. Um, and I get that with my son. He'll ask me to do something. I go and do it. And it's like, well, why did you do it that way? Well, because that's the way I do it. So
So
I've
how
got
does it feel? How does it feel when you're in this other orientation to it? How does it feel in your body, and what are you sensing in terms of emotions?
so now as I sort of have gotten through life taking all the hits on it, I finally have gotten to a point of um, letting it just roll off my back because I know what I've done is right. It's, I've completed it. There are no mistakes. So what's wrong with my way?
Yeah. So what do you notice about the two approaches?
Um, I'm much more secure in the newer approach. I found a solution to it and my solution is, I'm not going to stand here and be beaten up over something that I've done correctly.
Well, and a couple of other things stand out for me as well, in addition to that. So when we were coming at it from a problem perspective, the issue was you were either right or wrong, in essence, if I
Correct.
boiled it down to its core.
Right.
And then when we came from the different perspective of, what you would like to be different, the outcome, and it wasn't quite a solution then, but it was opening up. You were able to tick off like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different things. So one
Right.
was, you know, block out our words, um, ask what's the right way, and then articulate that was you're doing your right way. So not accepting the premise that her way is the only way, her way is the highway,
Right.
and basically not doing the dishes. And
Right.
and there were probably many, many more. And so when I'm saying this, what is showing up in your thoughts?
Um, that I have choices and those choices are based on um, numerous solutions and you got to take one of them and stand behind it.
Yeah, and it occurs to me right now that I had a sister, I hope she doesn't listen to this, who used to, basically tell me all the time what to do. I do believe it's probably one of the reasons I went to law school eventually, because I don't like people telling me what to do. But the point is, she used to tell me, and it's not exaggerated, but she used to tell me how much butter to put on my toast. Like, don't put that much butter on, or you need to have more butter on that. And I used to turn to her and say, "Who died and made you God?" So that
Yeah,
was my way of not
dealing with
not
it. Sure.
accepting the premise. All right, but it still left me with a residue in terms of, well, maybe I'm not doing it correctly, which is accepting the premise. So when we're coming from an outcome or not a goal perspective, it's different, because a goal is, what do we want to achieve? And it's a benchmark. We either are there or we're not. And there's nothing wrong with goals, but it's a slippery slope when we're thinking about some of these instances where we're holding a lot of emotional baggage, because you're an adult and you still remember the pain, the angst, or whatever it is, however intense, that not doing it correctly is,
Right.
by whoever arbitrary standard that may be. When we come at it from a different perspective, what you want to be different, which is a step towards figuring out what outcome, what solution may get you there, then more things open up. So where else could you apply this kind of thinking?
Um, so I actually apply it in a lot of different ways, but if I um in one example is I've taken on a repping job and my husband used to do it. And so now I'm going to be doing it. And uh, the company said to me, "Oh, just ask him how he did it. And, you can follow his steps." So we sat down this weekend and I was asking him, And so there were certain things I had to do to prepare. And so I sat here at my desk preparing, and he looked at me and he goes, "It shouldn't take you that long to prepare. What are you doing wrong?" I hate somebody asking me that question. I'd rather you say, how are you doing it? Or, you know, something like that. But hearing the word
What were you
wrong,
thinking?
what?
What were you thinking?
Yeah, yeah. Um, and so I said to him, "I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm doing it my way." And he looked at me and he goes, "You know, you're going to make this, a harder project than ever before." And I looked at him and I said, No, in my perspective, I'm simplifying it." And there was no way to convince him one way or the other. And I just said, "I think there's several ways to do this." And he goes, "Well, there are." And it was like, haha, I won. Um, and I said, "Look, let me do it my way. And if I have any more questions, I'll ask you." And it sort of resolved it. It's like he didn't have to watch what he thinks I'm doing too intensely, that he got away doing very simply. But I see more intensity in the job than he did. And I want to make sure that I dot every I and cross every T. And now maybe once I start doing it on a regular basis, I may find those shortcuts. But his way is not wrong, but neither is mine. And now I'm able to hear that and see that without getting angry. It's like, okay, well, this is how I'm going to do it.
So what stands out to you just in that last little segment where that his way wasn't wrong, your way wasn't wrong?
Um, it makes me be more aware of options that we have in life. Um, growing up, everything appeared to be black and white. You either do it or you don't do it. Either you do it right or you get in trouble for doing it wrong, even though it may have been completed. And I I know for a very long time, even as an adult working in business, I always was waiting for somebody to tell me that I did something wrong. And that gave me more migraines. It made me feel sick to my stomach. It made me afraid to open my mouth at times because I was going to be wrong. But whatever I did to gain this confidence, I'm willing to show in front of somebody that this is how I did it. And if I didn't come up with the right answers, then let's sit down together and let's try to figure it out. And
So
that
Kim,
would be my
that is
solution.
so perfectly, if I had told you to say those words, it couldn't be more perfect. So what's, and I didn't tell you to say
Yeah,
those
you
words.
didn't. No.
But what stands out for me is that you were coming from a place of confidence, but openness. So it wasn't a matter of being right or wrong. It was a matter of saying, um, I have confidence in my approach, but I'm willing to listen to alternatives.
Right.
And coming from that position, how does it feel for you?
Oh, it makes me, I feel open. Um, and for those of you who aren't watching on YouTube and just hearing my words, but for so long, I would work almost like with my arms crossed. I was holding in, this is how I have to do it. And now it's more like, well, this is how I'm going to do it. But oh, if you come along and suggest, Karen, you may want to move this to the right and the other to the left, I'm going to look at it. I'm going to be able to see it because I'm not going to be sitting here thinking that this is the only way to do it or this is all I know.
And just watching your body language before and after, and how you just expressed it, it also conveys to me that you're living a more expansive version of yourself rather than a constricted version, like a one note samba or a,
Right.
a somewhat protective stance. And, what's it like to live a life that's, needs to protect itself versus a life that can be open and embracing.
And I thought living that life previously was normal, and it was my normal,
Yeah,
okay?
right. Mhm.
But I always knew there was something wrong, and I couldn't figure it out. Um, and uh, I guess being pushed to retire from a job that I really liked early um, made me say, "Whoa, wait a second. Who am I, and what can I do?" And um, I'm not going to, I don't want to be stuck anymore. I don't want to be afraid of doing something and having somebody criticize something because it's not right in their eyes.
So
You know,
not being defined by other people's ideas of what you
right.
should do,
Yep.
that stands out. And it's kind of like blossoming. You start out as a bud, and it's kind of wound upon itself, and so on. And in time, with the right elements, the flower opens from the bud into
Yep.
a blossom.
Yep.
And I just see a different presence in terms of kind of like the courage of your convictions, I guess, is what I'm seeing.
Yeah. To a degree. And I find it in my personal life too. I mean, I have a very open, giving husband, but sometimes I don't hear his words that way. And in the past, I'd be very argumentative about something that it appeared we were disagreeing about. Now, um, when I hear it, um, if I don't feel that I have the energy to discuss it any further, I'm comfortable with walking away from it and coming back to it later if necessary. Whereas in the past, I must be wrong. How do I get around this? I guess I have to apologize. And it's like that took more energy, and my self esteem kept getting less and less. And
Exactly.
he meant nothing by that. I mean, it hurt him when he finally figured that out. It was like, well, no, but I am allowed to have my opinion. And it was like, yeah, you are. So why can't I listen to it?
Yeah, so like many things in life, a lot of it is self-induced. It's all happening between our ears, and
Right.
we can decide whether we're going to believe certain thoughts we have versus other thoughts, and that's like 90% of what we're struggling with. Anybody's struggling with at any
Right.
given time. So what would be a primary takeaway you think listeners should be thinking about from our
Um,
conversation today?
I th- what I really think would be helpful if um, we all sort of like look in a mirror of some sort, see our reflection, and find out, try to dig in as to what it is you want to hear and how you are interpreting things. And I'm going to go back to my mom for this explanation that I knew my mother loved me. My mother did a lot of wonderful things with me and for me, but I always heard disapproval, even in her approval. And it wasn't until I finally like shook it off and said, I don't want this to happen anymore, when I could say, okay, you know, maybe she doesn't like this, but you know what? I don't like certain things that she does either. And that opened up my brain to say, hey, you know, this is conversation. It may not necessarily be reprimand. And that makes a difference in how you can communicate with other people and how you can feel confident in what you're doing.
Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful takeaway. So that's problem versus solution perspective. I mean,
Yep.
it's a big topic. It's really broad. It sounds a little vague, but we can just be noticing those little forks in the road about, okay, am I coming at this from right or wrong? You know, how do I solve the problem versus what effect do I want? You know, what do I want to experience? And what steps I can take to gain that experience. That's what starts opening up the solutions.
And I think it's giving yourself the approval to, you know, make those changes. Because I didn't for a long time. You know, I was trying to be, like I said, the good child, whether it was with my mother or at work or even here at home with my husband and son. And, you know, when you're trying to be good all the time, at least for me, I wasn't. And, you know, now I don't know, I just feel free and I don't want to lose it.
Yeah, and just in a phrase, it's not accepting the original premise that
Right.
there's other options. So excellent. I'm happy for
Well,
you.
that was a very heavy conversation today.
Mhm.
But hey, you know, I'm feeling good about it. So um I guess I made some headway today.
Hope
So
you all do.
yeah, I hope so. Have a great day, everybody, and feel free to contact us at newclevelandradio@gmail.com. Again, if you'd like to be on this podcast with Candace and myself, we would love to have you. So let us know and have a great day.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Karen. Okay.